What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, former unified welterweight world champion superstar boxer, Keith one-time Thurman, he takes the time and the opportunity to call out a few fighters. Keith Thurman, 29 wins, 1 loss, no draws, 22 big wins by way of knockout. Keith Thurman is 32 years of age. Keith Thurman stands at 5'7.5" with a 69-inch arm reach. The last time we saw Keith Thurman in the ring was July of 2019 when he took on and lost to legendary 8 division world champion, iconic Filipino superstar boxer Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao for Keith Thurman's WBA, World Boxing Association title. With that said, Keith Thurman has been inactive. So Keith Thurman, he recently calls out undefeated unified WBC IBF welterweight world champion superstar boxer Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr., who is widely considered by many to be top 3 best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Errol Spence Jr., 27 wins, no losses, no draws, 21 wins by way of knockout. Errol Spence Jr. is 31 years of age, stands at 5'9" with a 72-inch arm reach. He also makes mention of undefeated 3-division world champion, who was the former undisputed junior welterweight world champion, currently the WBO welterweight world champion, widely considered by many to be the #1 best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and Terence Crawford, 37 wins, no losses, no draws, 28 big wins by way of knockout. Terence Crawford, 34 years of age, standing 5'8" with a 74-inch arm reach. With that said, Terence Crawford, he has a mega showdown on his hands November 20th as he take on former 2-time welterweight world champion superstar boxer Showtime Sean Porter, Las Vegas, Nevada, Mandalay Bay Arena. With that said, Keith Thurman, he was asked about a comeback fight. Keith Thurman says he simply been out the ring far too long. It's overdue, right? He stated that, it's not healthy for him. It's not helping him. He's past the point of rest. Okay, it's overdue now. He should have been back in the ring. So Keith Thurman, he states that he would love to be back in the ring if everything plays out the way he wants it to play out. He'll be back in the ring in December. Okay, if not, he'll be back in the ring in January. That will push Keith Thurman to have 3 fights in 1 year. But Keith Thurman, he wants to have a fight in December and 2 fights in 2022. Otherwise, he says that he'll have to fight early January and try to get 2 more fights in, okay? But he wants a tune-up type fight before he gets back on the big stage. So Keith Thurman is looking just to get back in the mix, and he stated that he's looking for, a stay busy fight, a tune-up fight, and then he wants to get back in the mix. It's been a very long time since Keith Thurman was in the square circle. With that said, he was asked about, obviously, Cuban star boxer who's the WBA champion, Yordenis Ugas. He just recently defeated Manny Pacquiao and officially stripped Manny Pacquiao the WBA title that the Manny Pacquiao he took from Keith Thurman July 2019. At one point in time, Manny Pacquiao was stripped of the WBA title, and Yordenis Ugas was elevated to the WBA super champion without beating Manny Pacquiao. But we know, as Errol Spence, he suffered an eye injury. He was supposed to fight Manny Pacquiao August 21st of this year. He had to be removed from the fight. Obviously, he couldn't continue with the eye injury. And so Yordenis Ugas, who was supposed to be the co-main event, was elevated to the main event against Manny Pacquiao, and he got a unanimous decision victory over Manny Pacquiao. So with that said, Keith Thurman says he would love to fight Yordenis Ugas and get an opportunity to get his belts back. But he mentioned the relationship between himself and Errol Spence Jr., okay? Before that, though, Keith Thurman, he says that, a fight between Terence Crawford and himself would be a mega fight. Now, he knows when he had a belt, it didn't seem like he was too eager to get in the ring with either Terence Crawford or Errol Spence. He says that's because he had bigger things to do, which is not correct, okay? Because Keith Thurman, he's saying he had bigger things to do, but in all reality, Keith Thurman was inactive, okay? After he beat, he did beat Sean Porter. He beat Danny Garcia back-to-back, okay? He beat Sean Porter in 2016, then he beat Danny Garcia in 2017. But he only fought once in 2016, that was Sean Porter, and he only fought once in 2017, that was Danny Garcia. So he won the belt, against Robert Guerrero, okay, the WBA title. He beat Leonard Bundu. These are the guys Keith Thurman beat. And in the unification bout with Danny Garcia in 2017, he defended against Sean Porter. So he says that he had bigger fights on his hands is the reason why he's been putting off Errol Spence Jr. Well, that's not true, because Errol Spence, he beat Kell Brook, and when he beat Kell Brook, he's been calling out Keith Thurman for quite some time, okay? Kell Brook, he beat Sean Porter in 2014 for the belt, but Kell Brook lost the belt to Errol Spence in 2017. So when Keith Thurman beat Danny Garcia in the unification bout in 2017, he could have stayed active and fought Errol Spence in the unification bout, but Keith Thurman, he did not, okay? When Terence Crawford made his debut in the welterweight division, Keith Thurman also stated that he was too small and needed to prove himself a lot more before he got an opportunity. So there were big fights for Keith Thurman to have made, and Keith Thurman simply just did not make those fights. And he was just simply inactive, point blank and period. He cited that he had injuries. So Keith Thurman stating that he had other big plans is the reason why he didn't fight Errol Spence Jr. is completely not true, because Keith Thurman just wasn't active. After he beat Danny Garcia, he could have went into a unification bout with Errol Spence. But he cited that he had injuries. He continued to tell the boxing world, even face to face with Errol Spence, that he wanted to let the fight marinate and build up. So Keith Thurman, he just simply had no interest in fighting Errol Spence Jr. And when it came to Terence Crawford, Keith Thurman, again, he cited that Terence Crawford was too small. He wasn't ready. He needed to prove himself at the welterweight division. Although Terence Crawford, for his first fight at welterweight, he defeated Jeff Horn for the WBO title that Jeff Horn had beaten Manny Pacquiao for, okay? So when you look at it from that standpoint, you say to yourself, Keith Thurman had opportunities to have big fights, but he just was inactive. For one, he cited that he had injuries. Keith Thurman just wasn't, he just wasn't very active, and he just didn't seem very motivated or very eager, to make these fights happen. So he says now that Errol Spence Jr. is simply salty. He says Errol Spence Jr. is salty because, he never made the fight with Errol Spence. But Errol Spence needs to just be a fighter and make it happen, because at the end of the day, it's just frustration on the part of Errol Spence because he wants these big fights. Well, it's not just frustration. It's the fact that, Errol Spence was looking to fight Keith Thurman when Keith Thurman was a champion and when Keith Thurman was more relevant. We got to be honest, right? Out of sight, out of mind. Keith Thurman is not relevant right now, and that's because of his lack of inactivity, okay? Out of sight, out of mind. And so now Keith Thurman, numerous occasions, he just, he shrugged off Errol Spence Jr. Now he's saying he never disrespected Errol Spence Jr., so there's no need for them to have such tension and such bad blood, because, it's still a very big fight, whether he's a champion or not. The point is, when he was a champion, Errol Spence was trying to unify and make a massive fight, and Keith Thurman just wouldn't give him the opportunity. Similar situation goes for Keith Thurman and Terence Crawford, okay? Until Keith Thurman, when he lost the belt, to Manny Pacquiao, is when he got very vocal about Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. And Errol Spence and Terence Crawford are saying, well, now you don't have a belt. Now you're not as relevant. Now you already lost to Manny Pacquiao and you have nothing to lose. Keith Thurman's motto from the beginning was one time Thurman, and I got an O and I ain't afraid to let it go. But yet Keith Thurman seemed to be reluctant to let it go, okay? So he just didn't seem too eager to get in the ring with these guys, okay? He stated that he wanted to let the fight build, like I stated with him and Errol Spence. He wanted to let it marinate. And him and Terence Crawford, Terence Crawford needed to get bigger and build himself up. So Keith Thurman was playing the game of, dare I say, chicken, and allowing these fighters to, marinate, as he said that he thought Errol Spence was going to be his Manny Pacquiao Floyd Mayweather fight. Well, he actually got an opportunity to fight Manny Pacquiao himself, and he came up short, okay? So he stated that, a fight between him and Yordenis Ugas would be action-packed, because he's going to press Yordenis Ugas. He's going to press the fight. He's going to press the speed of the fight and the tempo of the fight, and make Yordenis Ugas fight at a pace he's not comfortable at. Yordenis Ugas is WBA champion, and there's a lot of, chatter that we could possibly see Errol Spence fight Yordenis Ugas in a unification bout, okay? Well, we first have to see how Errol Spence come back, because he had a broken detached retina, and that's a serious eye injury. So we don't know the timetable of when Errol Spence is actually going to get back in the ring, you know, and Yordenis Ugas has mandatories, because the World Boxing Association, they're trying to eliminate as many belts as possible after they got a lot of flack for what took place in the Maestro, Michael Fox fight. You know, after that fight, you know, they got a lot of flack for that, because the judge was on the WBA payroll essentially, and the WBA simply, you know, received a black eye, you know, point blank and period. And they're trying to clean up their image and their brand. They're trying to make their brand back, you know, relevant. So with that said, you know, credible, should I say. So with that said, you know, they have Yordenis Ugas going into a mini tournament with the mandatories and things of that nature. So we don't know what's going to play out with that, but that just gives Errol Spence more time to heal, because, you know, we know that Errol Spence, he wants to collect the belts, okay? So Keith Thurman, he says that, you know, with or without the belts, you know, it's a big fight between him and Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford, right? He says, I'm a bigger fight for Terence Crawford, even without the belts, than Terence Crawford versus Yordenis Ugas. Yeah, he's a bigger profile name than Yordenis Ugas, and Keith Thurman, he says he understands the meaning of the fight, you know, would be more relevant than the size of the fight, right? Meaning that what's at stake, because the belts will be at stake, so that's going to make the fights much bigger fights, okay? Because there's a lot at stake. But namesake wise, he's saying that he's a bigger fight. You know, yeah, he is. He's starting to sound like Anthony Joshua after Anthony Joshua lost to Alexander Usyk and lost his belts, and then he started to say, well, you know, a fight between myself and Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder, even without the belts, is a bigger fight than us with the belts. The belts is just a storyline. But prior to that, Anthony Joshua was saying that it's not about the fighters, it's about the belts. It's about the belts and the legacy. But he since changed his tune when he lost the belts. And it seems like Keith Thurman is on the same wavelength as Anthony Joshua, saying that the belts, you know, add to it, but the names are bigger because Keith Thurman doesn't have a belt, right? So he said that, you know, definitely he understands that Errol Spence and Terence Crawford are going to seek out Yordenis Ugas fights. That's assuming Terence Crawford gets past Sean Porter, which is no foregone conclusion, because the Sean Porter fight is the biggest fight of Terence Crawford's career. It's the most, dare I say, the most competitive fight of Sean Porter's career. So, you know, Terence Crawford's career. So that speaks volumes in itself. So with that said, you know, Keith Thurman, he's now saying that, you know, those fights, he's saying those fights need to happen. Well, they've been needing to happen, okay? Now Errol Spence says he has zero interest in fighting Keith Thurman, because he says he just simply don't like who Keith Thurman is as a person. So Keith Thurman is saying he don't understand where that attention is coming from, because it's just a point of him being salty because he never gave him the fight. Well, then you understand where the tension is coming from, because when y'all was both relevant and y'all both had belts, y'all could have had a massive unification bout and you shunned it off, period. And when it comes to Terence Crawford, you also shunned off that fight. As you said, Terence Crawford needed to get bigger and physically in size and prove he's a welterweight. And, you know, he just needed to build up his name more. So Keith Thurman has shunned off these fights, and now Keith Thurman doesn't even know when he'll be back in the ring. And Keith Thurman, you know, is just not relevant. Inactivity has proven to be Keith Thurman's Achilles heel. So let's see how everything unfolds and plays out moving forward. But that's all I got for y'all, man. Make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Hit the bell icon to get all the new notification. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share the videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.
Cynthia Baumgartner. You're watching Blue Blood Sport TV. Wow.